Cool. All right. So, thanks, guys. Excellent. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for coming, and I also want to thank Gita for taking time out to share her insights. Let's give her a little round of applause, shall we? So one more thing before we get into it. If along the way you've got a question that you'd like to ask, just pop up your hand and we'll get to you when there's a bit of a break. Okay? So to begin with, Gita, I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Right. So why am I giving this lecture? Why am I qualified to give you this lecture? I guess the main reason being that I'm very similar to Arvind. Sense that I was born in Brazil, lived my life overseas, and then my father put me into a strict boarding school in India because he wanted me to get some Indian values. After which I came here for my tertiary education, and this is back in 1988. Defies my age, but and then India beckoned again, and I went back to India to work, and I worked with Unilever, the Hindustan Lever as we called it, one of the largest multinational companies, but based had a big operation in India, and they posted me there because I was Indian origin. Worked there for a while, and then traveled the globe with my husband, met my husband there, traveled the globe with my husband, and then came back to Australia. So unlike Arvind, Adiga, who actually settled in Mumbai and is writing there, but he also traveled the globe after having his education in Australia. So so am I qualified to talk about the Indian perspective? I think I am.
Excellent. Good. So I think you wanted to begin by asking them a little bit about
That's right.
what they think about India.
Yes. Okay. So my first question to you before I begin answering your questions.
Should I do some writing?
That'd be great. What comes to mind when you think of India? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think India? Yeah.
Busy cities.
Busy cities? Go on. Everyone gets a chance to say something because everyone can think, right? Keep going. Busy cities? Yes?
The Taj Mahal.
The Taj Mahal. You can see my little head in that poster. It was like the Taj, by the way, is a mausoleum, so it is actually meant for in honor of someone the princess who died. So hope that wasn't me. I'm not dead as yet. Yes.
Rickshaw pullers.
Rickshaw pullers. Yes. Yes.
Tea shops.
Tea shops. Is that from the book? Did you have ideas before the book? Think of the ideas you had before the book too. Yeah.
Poverty.
What?
Poverty.
Poverty. Yes, poverty. Yeah.
Culture.
What culture? What about culture?
Culture. There's multiple.
Multicultural?
Yeah.
Okay, multicultural. Multicultural. Hinduism.
The animals?
The animals, what animals? The tigers?
Yeah.
Okay, the tigers.
Bollywood.
Bollywood? All right, how can we forget that?
Food?
Food.
Curry.
Curry. Food.
Bright colors.
Bright colors. Yeah.
Festivals?
Festivals.
How have you guys been exposed to India? Like, where have you seen India?
Movie.
Commonwealth Games.
The Commonwealth Games? 2010, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. Delhi. And movies. So what kind of movies? English movies that are taking scenes from India and stuff like that? Yeah. Okay.
Slumdog, good.
Yeah, all right, that's great. Everyone's contributed in some way or the other. That's great. Look at these points. Some of these points, of course, are feature in the book quite strongly, and some of them do not. So let's talk further. This is what I think everyone thinks of when you think of India. Yeah, the Taj Mahal. That's like the one of the wonders of the world. People go to India to see it, but there's more to India than just the Taj Mahal. See, these are some of the faces of India. Just take a few minutes to look at these faces and then I want to talk to you about it. So what do you see when you see these faces? Anyone? Ready to say something about these faces?
Contrast.
Contrasts. Yeah? What contrast? What do you see in contrast?
Lots of different faces,
Yeah?
different cultures, different religions.
Complexion?
Yeah.
Do you see different religions?
Yeah.
Do you see rural versus urban kind of faces? Rich versus poor? Traditional versus modern? Yeah? One of the beauties of India is it is a land of diversity. In fact, I'm quite stunned that it stays as one country, because there are so many parts to India that are pulling it away from each other. There's hardly any unity because of the fact that they're all so diverse in terms of the culture. Someone talked about multiculturalism. Well, there you go. You know, they're so different. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Now let's look at the country. Your story starts off, and I don't have a pointer here, so I've got to go up here. But your story starts in which little town does the story start in? Lakshmangarh. Yeah, Lakshmangarh. Lakshmangarh is in the border of Bihar, so that kind of yellow state there, Bihar, right below Nepal. So below Nepal, you have Bihar, and that's where it starts, in a little village in Lakshmangarh. And then he moves on to, what's the next place he moves on to?
Delhi.
No, before Delhi, he moves on somewhere else. His grandmother sends him and his brother off to a bigger city.
Very small part.
Yeah, for a small part of the book, she sends him off from the little village to a bigger Dhanbad, yeah, to Dhanbad. Dhanbad is on the border of the state below. So Jharkhand is the state, and on the border of that state is this coal mining town called Dhanbad. And then from there, he manages to wangle his way as a driver to Delhi. And he goes off to the capital, which of course is to the north. So Delhi is right on the north, next to Uttar Pradesh and Haryana. So that's the capital city, that's the big city. And then from there, where does he end up? In Bangalore, and Bangalore is down here, so in the south. Okay, so that's his movement in life. His movement up in life too, right? From where he was to where he ends up as an entrepreneur. So let's talk about this urban versus rural divide, because I think it's important to understand that contrast. India's population is 1.2 billion people. Okay, second most populous country in the world. I think it'll soon overtake China. GDP growth, 2015, 7.6%. It's pitted as one of the fastest growing economies of the world. And it is definitely a land of opportunity. In fact, today when I was driving in, there was apparently Deloitte, one of the consulting firms, had interviewed 8,000 young people, millennials as we call them, about how they see the future opportunities in their country. In Australia, was ranked really low. So the Australian millenniums obviously didn't see much of a future. India was ranked very high. So the Indian youngsters obviously see this as a land of opportunity. Yeah? Very similar to what Adiga portrays Balram doing. You know, there's a land of opportunity. You can get from the village to the city. 69% of the population is rural. And but that percentage is decreasing. There is a huge migration from the villages to the cities, very similar to the storyline that you have, and urbanization is increasing. In fact, 31% of the country is urbanized. And what we mean by urbanized is non-villages. So we have there's a gradient of cities in India. So they call them C cities, B cities, and A cities. The A cities are the big cities, the metros, and the B and the C cities are the smaller cities, and then you come to the villages. So there's this move to the city. So metro cities and B cities, let's look at New Delhi, just featuring the cities that your book has. Delhi has a population of 25 million people. That's more than the population of Australia, just in one city. So you think of the size and magnitude of the city. And it is the second most populous city in the world after Tokyo. Can you imagine? It's not surprising that Balram gets lost in Delhi. Yeah, he's a driver, and this is massive city, and he's new. He's not exactly, from Delhi. Obviously, he gets lost, yeah, and it's in the storyline.
So Gita, first of all, can I get you to sit there so that the viewers at home can watch you as well?
Oh.
You're very animated.
All right.
So what you're talking about here when you're talking about the urban and rural divide, in White Tiger they talk a lot, Diga talks a lot about a light and a darkness. And I guess the first thing you start thinking of when you think of that light and darkness is that he's kind of saying that the urban areas is light and that the rural areas is darkness. Do you think that's true? Is there two Indias?
It's interesting when he talks about, he does make a mention of the fact that Lakshmangarh is green, it's rural, life is at a slow pace, and he wonders why that's darkness, right? And he says Delhi is crowded, populated, polluted, but there's light there. It's just a question of opportunity. So where opportunity does not exist is in Lakshmangarh. Yeah, so therefore he equates, it's a very commercial business aspect to it. He equates that to be darkness because there was no opportunity. You'd be stuck in poverty if you stayed in the village. You have to move to the city, which might not be as comfortable, but land of opportunity. So there's lightness. So that's where it is. What was your second question?
Is there two Indias?
Is there two Indias?
You say that, that rural part of India is so far different from the city part of India.
Yeah, and I think I should show you some pictures for that to show you whether there is two Indias. I would agree that there is two Indias. There are two Indias, a rural India and a urban India, and I think it's very similar to Australia. There's the country towns and there's the cities, and they're different. It's just that in India, this divide will make a big difference to your lifestyle, make a big difference to your earning power, big difference to the opportunities that you get if you are stuck in a rural town versus a bigger city.
Yeah.
So we'll just go on to looking at the cities. So Delhi, the one that he ends up in, has a population of 25 million, second most populous city in the world, crowded, and I've got some pictures for you. Then he moves on to Bangalore, 11.5 million, so half the population of Delhi, smaller, but is facing a population boom. In fact, my in-laws, my husband's family lives in Bangalore, so I just went to Bangalore over the holidays and came back, and it's dismal now because of the fact that it's India's new Silicon Valley. Just about every IT company is based there, and we just heard news that Apple is starting manufacturing in Bangalore. Okay, so Apple wants to get into the Indian market. There's the best way to get into the good books of Indian politicians is to manufacture in India, and so they've just set up operations in Bangalore. So Bangalore is just booming at this stage, and their global call centers, which is where our friend Balram ends up getting a contract to drive the buses that cater to the night shift workers, and global call centers would work throughout the night because they're working at different time zones to the Western, clients that they serve. And a lot of women work in cities like Bangalore, and it's unsafe. Let's face it, it's quite unsafe in India to generally walk around in the night and pick up public transport and get there. So companies normally provide transportation. So there, Balram sees that opportunity, hires a couple of buses, taxis, or whatever he has in his little thing, gets a contract with these call centers, off to business, right? And so you've got scientific research, biotechnology, information technology firms in Bangalore. So it's one IT hub. Dhanbad, the little coal mining town that his grandmom Kusum forces the brother and him to go off to, is one step above the village that he grew up in, and therefore offered him a bit more opportunity. And from there he learned driving, and then from that driving school he got into this family, and then moved on further from there. And Lakshmangarh, of course, is a village in one of the poorest states of India. I just showed you the map. It was in Bihar, and 33% of the population there live below the poverty line.
Yeah. So while you show some of these pictures of them, I think one of the things that students might feel at first when they're reading White Tiger is that like Adiga is basically saying that the country towns are bad and that the cities are good. But as you read on, you start kind of seeing that that's maybe a little bit more complex. Would you generally say, for example, that the country towns are in the real India are worse and it's better to be in the city?
Definitely. Yeah, so the country towns definitely offer less opportunity. Some of the big cities in India are Wi-Fi'd. Like, I mean, there's just you don't have to have a internet connection. It's all Wi-Fi. The city is Wi-Fi'd. So there are leaps and bounds ahead of the villages in terms of the opportunities too. I mean, in terms of jobs and income, but on the other side, on the flip side, you've also got the negatives that every big city comes with, which is, so let's look at Lakshmangarh here. Yeah, rickshaw puller, someone said. Yeah, it's actually being phased out now. The Indian government has decided that if you are a rickshaw puller, you've got to get onto a bike to pull the rickshaw rather than pull someone, because this is inhumane. That's the Ganges. So in Lakshmangarh is the river. In fact, the stalk, I think, makes money out of putting a toll or something, a tax on people who fish. So the river is very important, part of Lakshmangarh. That's a little tea stall. I put the picture up because he does start his work at the little tea stall, and that's how tea stalls look. There'll be dime a dozen on the highways, because everyone stops for a chai. Chai is, great recreation in India. And that's how rural towns would look: green. Some of them would have roads which are built up, some of them wouldn't. Open spaces. People would normally be moving around in bullock carts, so the cattle's taking you.
So I was in India a few years ago, and I travelled through India a little bit, and one of the things that I noticed was that I didn't like the cities very much. They're crowded, they're noisy, they're stinky, there's a lot of rubbish and things like that. Whereas the country towns are actually really beautiful. They're often very, very attractive.
Yeah, but the Indians don't see it that way.
Yeah.
So you came in as a foreigner and you wanted those green spaces and you wanted the cleanliness, but the Indians don't see it as that way, because it's in the city that they get the job. It's in the city that they can make income, they can save, send back to the villages, which is what Balram's, pushed the pressure to do, to send back money to his grandmom, which he couldn't have done if he was sitting in the village. So the family is also very keen that the youngsters move away, because they can go get themselves jobs and send money back. So this migration from the rural areas to the urban areas is a big thing. It's happening, and therefore, as we speak, you find the cities becoming more crowded, the villages having more space. So that would be typically Lakshmangarh for you. Let's move to Dan. Yeah? You want to go back?
No, keep going. But, as you talk about that, I guess I want to also bring up modernization, because part of this rural versus urban divide is that the way that the book sort of presents it is that the rural area is very traditional, it's kind of old school, it follows the old ways, whereas the urban area has not just modernized in terms of they've got big buildings and there's wealth and that sort of stuff. There's also a new kind of way of life happening in urban
There's also
areas.
modernity in thinking. So there's talk about the dowry system in Lakshmangarh, and how I think they had to stop school. Balram and his brother had to stop school because they couldn't afford to keep going to school, because the parents had to get daughters married off, and that traditionality in the villages is breaking down when you move to the cities. People are now not insisting on the dowry system. Girls are treated more equally. There is also a breaking of the caste system, which I'll talk about as we speak. So Dhanbad is that slightly bigger city that he moves to. It's a coal mining town. Imagine the opportunities that exist in an industrial town. So I just put some pictures of the coal mining. It's also a big junction. It's kind of in the crossroads of the Ganges line. So it's like a city where the train station is very important, because it's from there that you cross over to other parts of India. So it's like a junction city. And that guy I put down mainly because that's how a typical politician in the rural area would look. Yeah, so he'd have this huge fan following, lot of garlands. He looks corrupt, doesn't he? There's just that look. Yeah, victory, 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 vote for me, and then, forget about the people. So I just put that down because Bihar politics, the politics of that Jharkhand, Bihar area would be sitting in Dhanbad where a lot of money is, a lot of industry is, so they'd all be pampering and catering to the people here. Delhi, 25 million, as we said. I started off with this picture. It's quite a historical city. It was the ancient capital that the British selected or used, so there's lots of British monuments. There's lots of Mughal monuments, so the history before the British. But at the same time, you can see modernity. There's a metro train. In fact, my son was just there last week, and he FaceTimes me and says, "Mum, the metro in Delhi is better than the metro in Melbourne." So, it's faster, it comes right on time. There's it actually zeroes down on the time that the train's going to take. So 1 minute to go, 50 seconds to go, and it's cleaner, and it's all above the roads.
Really?
So yeah, it's all like this raised. So therefore,
Delhi's an ugly city, isn't
well,
it? It's really
I think when you went there, the metro may not have been there.
No, I don't think
so.
So.
The metro has basically arrived in India in a big. So Bangalore has a metro too now, and they're all raised. So they've built it because they have the luxury of doing it new. So they've built it above the ground. So fairly modern city now. But on the other side is the picture of the pollution. And as a result of all this industrialization and the cars, everyone has on the average in Delhi about 3 cars to the family. And everyone, unlike China, what happened in China? They all decided that every alternate day you can bring your it's odd or even number.
Yeah.
So you drive your odd numbered registration on one day, and you can drive on the next day. You can't drive the odd. You've got to drive the even. They haven't done anything of that in India. So now all 3 cars of everybody in the family is on the road. So that's how polluted it is. It's also the capital, so therefore there's a lot of security. There's a police and road blocks everywhere, and the parliament sits in Delhi. So it's the power capital. It's where you should be if you want to become big in business, because you're busy bribing all the politicians to get your licenses through. Okay, so that's Delhi. Bangalore. So on the bottom is the picture that Bangalore kind of projects, the technology capital of India, and you'll find a lot of buildings like this: the Googles, the Dells, the HPs, the Apple. Everybody's there, but then look at the traffic on top. That's how it is. It'll take you on the average 2 hours to drive 10 kilometers. Yeah, so and chock-a-block during the peak hours. So there's a lot of companies letting people work from home, work different hours. The night shift's great. People love the night shift jobs because the roads are comparatively empty. So that's the flip side of Bangalore. But again, a land of opportunity. Yeah. So there's talking to youngsters there. Everyone comes out of college with uni with an average of 2 jobs. You come out of uni with an average of 2 jobs, so there's just that much opportunity. Okay, so that's Bangalore for you. The next contrast. So we talked about the urban and the rural divide, and whether there is really a lightness and darkness. I would agree with Adiga that there is darkness in the villages and lightness in the cities. Now I've got to see how what do you mean by lightness? I'm looking at lightness from an opportunity point of view. But whether the cities are cleaner, or whether the cities are greener, or whether the cities are less crowded, no. So it depends on what you mean by light and dark.
Yeah, so would you say that the depiction of poverty is accurate in White Tiger? There's some appalling poverty that we see happen. There's things like there's a moment where Kusum, the granny, feeds Balram the meat curry. There's chicken in the curry, and it's like this special deal because they never eat meat, and he throws it away. Is that what poverty is like in India?
I think chicken is a luxury. So getting fed chicken is not poverty; it's actually luxury. I mean, most people, if they can manage 2 meals a day, that would be in the villages. That would be, a great day.
And then another scene in the book later on is he goes to an urban slum. It's like direct, like he drives to the mall, he goes into the mall, and then he leaves the mall, and he walks outside, and like directly outside the mall is like this slum of the builders that have been making all these new modern buildings, and they live under tarpaulins, and they're going to the toilet just on the ground.
Yep.
There's this line of people.
Yeah, and yeah, what should I say? Yes, that exists. Yeah, so you got urban poverty and you got rural poverty. Generally, in the rural areas, you will not starve because you can always grow your own food. You'll get one meal. But in the urban areas, if you've moved from a rural area, you don't have a setup, you don't have a background, you end up in a slum doing some daily wage construction work, let's say, you could starve, because you're not growing your own food, so you have to buy food, and if what you've earned today is not enough to buy food, no food.
And I guess connected to that, Bahram grows up poor, he becomes wealthy over the course of the novel, but the vast majority of the time he is a servant of Ashok. Is there this kind of master-servant relationship that that they're virtually slaves to the rich?
I think there's a bit of a hyperbole there. Okay, so I'm not sure whether whether the servants are really treated the way the servants' quarters look like, or the way that they're asked to wash the feet. And I haven't seen any of that. I mean, I do have to say that I come from a pretty affluent family, and my in-laws have, I wouldn't call them servants, but they're people coming in to do work. I've got a driver, and I have a picture on my phone of the driver, but I didn't put it up. But yeah, we do have it, but I haven't seen any of that kind of absolute subservient slave kind of behavior. So I think there's a bit of a hyperbole there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So prosperity versus poverty. 2011-2012, the UN Millennium Development Goals stated that 21.9% of Indian population lived below the poverty line, and they defined that as $1.25 a day. US. Okay.
It's 1 in 5.
Yeah, 1 in 5.
In a population of how many?
1.2 billion.
There you go.
There you go. And this is, of course, closely linked with the rural-urban distribution and the social class and the caste system. So this poverty divide exists. There's a class system, and there's this rural-urban. So most of the poor are in the rural areas, and most of the poor are the lower castes.
Yeah. Did you want to talk a little bit more about the caste system? It's something that's quite different for, I guess, people who haven't experienced.
That's right. Okay, so let's go on to that. Social classes, just like here, there's the upper, the middle, and the lower class, and this is mainly based on income, how much you earn, what kind of assets you have, how much land you own. That's where the class system comes from. It's also linked to education. In India, there is a big push for education, even in the rural areas, and you can see from that school. However, whatever kind of school it was, but the people are still wanting kids to get educated, because education is seen as a road to a higher class. Employment, and then money, and then you can move up the classes. Religious and caste orientation, we'll talk about now. As you would have seen in the first few photographs, multiple religions, some religions much more traditional than others, and therefore with traditionality comes how they deal with women, girls, children, education, kind of jobs, etc. So for example, we're talking about him driving girls from night shift operations in Bangalore. Now that same girl, if she came from a traditional B city, her parents wouldn't even want her to work in a night shift operation, because that's seen as girls should not be out of the house after dark. So the fact that they've come to the city liberates them. And then the money. By working night shifts, you get higher penalty rates. There's so much money. There's income, there's a big city to spend it on, you change your clothing, you become modern. There's that whole transformation. Okay? So, caste system. So the class system is just similar to what you guys are exposed to. Yeah? Even in Australia, we've got the 3 classes, and a lot of it is linked to education and enterprise. But with the caste system, it's slightly different. India is a Hindu majority country. When we say officially in the constitution we're secular, which means as a country we're not it's not like the Islamic State of Pakistan or in Islamic,
the government's
not religious. So in a government school you can't have religious pictures up and stuff like that. So it's a secular country. But in terms of the population, the majority are Hindu. Now, Hinduism is based on a caste system, and that's, I know you won't understand this, but this is how it is. We're all born into a caste. Okay? The castes have a hierarchy. So then you had the Vaishyas. Vaishyas were basically the people who were in trade and commerce. So the entrepreneurs. And then you had the Shudras, who were the lowest caste, the untouchables as we call them. They did all the jobs that no one wanted to do: clean the toilets, clean the roads, sanitation, abattoirs, working with dead animals, that kind of.
Tell me if I'm wrong. So these are sort of big classifications, and then there's subgroups within it? Because like Bahram says that he's from a sweet maker caste. That's his caste. Like that's not.
That is in that. Yeah.
So what caste is he?
Yeah, so he's a sweet maker. His surname is Halwai, and Halwai means sweet maker. And a sweet maker is basically a Vaishya because he runs a business, a sweet making business. His father or father's family, initially father was a rickshaw puller, but before that would have had sweet shops. So he's not in the bottommost, but circumstances and what the village offered him in terms of opportunity, parents had to move on to drive rickshaws, which is a lower profession. But the caste is still Vaishya. The surname dictates it all. It's quite interesting. Not only does he move up in life entrepreneurially, but he also takes on a new identity. What's his new name?
Sharma.
Sharma, as a surname, is a Brahmin surname. So he figured, I guess, I'm taking on a new identity. Why don't I jump up the caste system and go right on top and be the Sharmas? Sharmas are Brahmins.
So I think one of the things that the Adiga is sort of suggesting is that the caste system has been breaking down. That it used to be in fairly fixed castes, but he starts off effectively poorer than what he's supposed to be, and then winds up richer than he.
Yeah, but there's the confusion.
Yeah.
The caste system is not breaking down. You cannot break the caste system. You're born into a caste and you die in a caste. What you can move is up the class system.
So they're two different.
You can be a rich Brahmin or a poor Brahmin. You can be a rich Shudra or a poor Shudra, but you'll always be a Shudra because you're born a Shudra.
And which one's more important then, class or caste?
Well, that's for you to guess. What do you think? Which one's more important, caste or class? Caste? Class. Which is what Indians are thinking nowadays. So the caste system is not breaking down, but you're letting go of those stigmas that you had with the lower caste. So nowadays you find people from other castes marrying people from lower castes because it's class that matters. If that Shudra kid has had an education, is now the engineer working in Apple, doesn't matter if it's a Shudra. He's got the money, he'll support me, I'll get married to him, I might be a Brahmin. So just to give you an example from my own life, I'm a Brahmin, so I come from that top caste, and I married a Kshatriya. So my husband's from the second rung, and it didn't matter to us because we fell in love. And like I said, the class system was such that he could support me and I could support him, but the caste system didn't matter. So caste system is not breaking down. It's just not being given the importance that it used to be given when people were mainly rural, and that's all that they bothered about.
So this maybe brings me along to the next question, that if you've got this caste system and then you've got a class system as well that's sort of side by side, what is the attitude of Indians, maybe the wealthier Indians, towards poor people in India? So irrespective of the caste, it doesn't matter what caste you are, you belong to that lower class because you're poorer, and you've got the richer. Well, Is it the case that a rich person says, well, you're from the Shudra class and therefore
caste. Shudra is a caste.
Sorry, caste. My bad. The Shudra caste, so therefore you deserve to be poor.
Nah, I don't think that feeling's gone. That feeling was there maybe about 50 years ago.
there's a little bit of this kind of like, you know, if that like the rich don't, in particularly in Luxembourg, they don't seem to feel an obligation towards poor people.
Maybe
There's
not
a lot of philanthropy.
There's not a lot of philanthropy. I guess they're just fortunate that, and everyone's trying to make money and everyone's trying to move up, and they're happy to trod on anyone to move up. And so as you know, there's no philanthropy at this stage. You're not worrying about the poor. You're just worrying about yourself progressing up the ladder. And you're in Lakshmangarh. You know, the opportunities aren't great. So whatever there are, you'll seize them and keep moving, you know.
So is that fair that in India, in the real India, is it like dog eat dog? Is
it's dog eat dog.
Selfish?
Absolutely. Dog eat dog. Competition, like I said, is so immense. Like I said, every youngster will have 2 jobs, but there'll be about 1 billion people trying to get a job at any point of time. It's just, you know, the competition's just so much.
That's quite different from Australia. Like in Australia, you might say that it's dog eat dog, but at least we all kind of pretend that we care about one another.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge charity culture here, which there isn't. So in India, people believe that charity begins at home. So if you have to help someone, you'll try and help your poorer family members. But, you know, giving it outside the family is, that'll come last. Only if you have enough, heaps and heaps, you're a big industrialist, and you have enough to spare, you'll give outside your family. Otherwise, you'll try and, at the most, help your own family. So charity begins at home in India.
Cool. Let me know if there's something else that you wanted to bring up. But my next question for you was about corruption, because I guess, like, if it is dog eat dog and it's about being selfish, then you can kind of understand why India, like at least how it's presented in the book, is so deeply corrupt, because nobody cares about any of the rules.
Yeah, nobody cares about any of the rules. You can start with the traffic. Yeah, so there are lines on the road. No one will drive within their lines. They'll all drive in the middle of the line, and it's dog eat dog. If I can get in before you, I will get in. It's you have to only bother about the traffic in front of you. You don't have to worry about the traffic behind you. So the guy behind has to watch out for you. So you will dog eat dog, get into the lane, and he has to make sure he doesn't bump into you. So it's like that.
I got into a taxi in Mumbai, and I didn't think I was going to survive it.
Yeah.
It was the most
I can't
intense
drive
thing.
in spite of having, you know, learned my initial driving there. I can't drive there anymore. Politics in India, which comes to the next point.
Yeah.
So we are the largest functioning democracy in the world. Yes, so 1.2 billion people, and they vote. And voting is not compulsory, unlike in Australia. So it is optional, but there's a lot of incentives thrown in, a lot of bribing happening. So you literally pull people out of their houses and huts in the rural villages and queue them up to vote, and you tell them where to vote, and they're illiterate, and they're all symbols. So unlike here, where the ballot card looks like it's, you know, going on for kilometers, there's just basically symbols there. So you'd have the hand for the Congress, you'd have the lotus for the BJP, and people will be told, vote for the lotus, vote for the hand, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. And so they just go there blindly, and half of them don't even know how to write and read, so they just thumbprint on the political party. The political party comes to power, and then they forget about them. So that's very, very common, especially in rural India. And that's what Balram talks about, you know, with the what's the name of the guy?
The Great Socialist.
The Great Socialist, yeah. And
is there a socialist party in India?
there is. It's interesting about socialism. When the country was born, when the British left in 1947, the country was set up as a socialist country. So the first thing they said is that India is going to be self-dependent on itself and on socialist principles. So everyone's going to get a ration card, everyone's going to get a certain amount of food, like a ration for the month, depending on the number of family members you have. And that system still continues, by the way. It's just moved on to become electronic. It's no longer a little card, it's now a digitally chipped card. It's called the Aadhaar card, which I'm going to talk about in the presentation, because whether, Balram could have done what he did, lost his identity totally and become a new identity in today's India, maybe not. Okay? But, so the multi-party system is crowded. You've got main players with the Congress Party, which is the party that set up when India became independent. That was the party that ruled India for many, many years. It became a bit of a nepotism. There became a little bit of nepotism because the Gandhi family, we talk about Gandhi, the Gandhi family kind of ruled. And it's not the same as the Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is revered as the father of the nation. He didn't have a family to continue on. The Gandhi family that ruled India for many years is a different Gandhi.
Really? I did not know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So Mahatma Gandhi was from Gujarat, and he was a very simple man.
Did they change their name? Are they?
No, they had the same name, but they just became. It was the first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's daughter who married into the Gandhi family, and she then took on the name Gandhi. And yes, and the Gandhi family continued on for almost 30 years, ruling, one after the other. But the Congress Party has now lost its power. It's and this is quite interesting. It's a bit about the rise of nationalism in the world. And I guess India's got the rise of nationalism. What they have and who they have in power now is a Hindu nationalist party. So it's a secular country, but a Hindu nationalist party rules. So,
which would be like having a Christian party in charge in Australia.
Yes.
You're right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a bit about this whole thing about, whether the country really wants to be secular, how the Hindu majority is kind of usurping its power. There's a bit of that nationalism growing there. So we've got the BJP currently ruling, and that belt that we talk about, this whole story is built in that very Hindu nationalist belt. That whole Bihar, the Ganges River, Delhi, that whole area is all Hindu nationalist. Okay, so I can understand the Stork and the other guy, the driver, the taxi driver, not the bus driver who became a politician.
Yeah, Vijay, I think.
Vijay, all Hindus, rising in that particular area.
So while you're talking about this, I guess are those examples of corruption that you see in the book, are they fairly common? So you've got the school teacher who refuses to teach anything. He's stolen the kids' uniforms and he's selling them in another place. Or the doctors who are paying off their supervisors to say that they have worked in this public hospital and then they're off working in a private hospital. Is that the stuff that goes on?
Okay, there's a bit of hyperbole there. There might be the odd person who'll do that in a school, for example. These holidays, I went to one of the schools in the rural areas. My son volunteered there after his VCE, and we went back after 2 years to just go and see the kids. And it's what a wonderful school. It's based on donations. It's philanthropy because it's a huge organization called IT company that's actually sponsoring the school, and the teachers there are all rural. They get a salary of 10,000 rupees a month, which is, if you were the city, as a teacher, you'd get something like 60,000 rupees a month. So they're working at 1/6 of the cost, but they're doing it. And guess who they're educating? They're educating kids of construction workers who are in the city, busy constructing big buildings. What do you do with kids when you're constructing? Send them off to the school, which is in the rural areas. So you've got pockets of brightness in the rural areas like that. So it's not all dark, but they're pockets.
So it sounds to me like you're saying that India is improving, that it once was not so great, and now through modernization it's getting better. I don't think that's what Adiga's saying.
No, he's not. So he paints a really dark picture in this book, and therefore I think that the book is a bit darker than the real India. And I guess he's making a point. And when you want to make a point, you sometimes have to make it really strongly.
Yeah.
And which is what he's done. He's made it really strongly, and so he's focusing on the extremes, which may not be the real India in the sense that it's not omnipresent. It's maybe the exceptions.
No. So his criticism is more that India is changing, but it started bad and it's staying bad.
I wouldn't paint such a dark picture. India's changing. It has issues. People are working their way through the issues. I'm a classic example of someone who bet all these odds. In the sense, I didn't look at the caste system. I didn't look at the.
Murder somebody.
I didn't murder anyone to get where I got, and I'm modern, but I'm still Hindu. You know what I mean? I have all the traditional values, but I don't necessarily. I'm not a fanatic.
So you'd say that his criticism is unfair?
Yeah, I would.
Interesting.
Okay. So with politics, though, there is a fair amount of corruption. So the way he talks about it in the book about corruption, especially in the rural areas, because the people are illiterate, don't really understand politics, and in such a large functioning democracy, if you don't understand the democratic principles, and you just follow the blind. So the herd leads, you're just following the herd. So the herd says vote for the lotus, everyone will go and put the lotus because you're getting a fridge. Oh, I'd like a fridge in my hut. Let's vote for the lotus. What the lotus ends up doing, they don't care. They've got the fridge. That's all that matters to them. So it's not an educated decision that they take when they vote. It's more just blind leading blind kind of thing, and therefore corruption roots, and so there is a fair bit of corruption. So what they talk about in corruption in this book, I think, fairly realistic, especially in the rural areas.
So, to some extent, his criticism is at least valid.
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah. So there are two Indias. I would agree with that. A light one and a dark one. Now, what we classify as light and what we classify as dark is up to interpretation. But rural versus urban, rural definitely dark, urban definitely light from an opportunity point of view. Just from income, moving up your class system, that kind of point of view, yeah, you'd want to move to the light from the dark. Rich versus poor, yes, the divide exists, and it exists across the board. So it exists in the rural areas, it exists in the urban areas. I think in the urban areas it exists a bit less, because it's in the rural areas that you have the landlords and the feudal system of owning land, and the poor not just manual laborers working the land, getting some basic daily wage, but the same poor can, if they're educated, can go to the cities, get a city job, a white collar job as we call it, and move up in life. So the divide maybe isn't as much in the urban areas as it is in the rural areas. High caste versus low caste, you can't help that. You're born into a caste, like I said, you can't change it. That divide exists. But does it matter in today's India? Not so much as in the old India. It doesn't really matter what caste you are. In fact, it's quite interesting. My husband's sister's daughter is getting married. So she calls us in October last year and said, I'm getting, someone's just, so-and-so has proposed to me, and I've said yes. And so my husband said, oh, that's great. When's the wedding? And she said April. And I said, okay, we're going to book our tickets. Make sure it's during the school holidays because Gita has to come. And then after we put the phone down, I said, but you didn't ask what caste the guy is from. And my husband said, who cares? And I thought, yeah, I guess so. All right, we go to India these holidays, and I thought I'd just ask my father-in-law generally to find out about the caste, because he's not from the same state as my husband is.
So you wouldn't know straight away based on their last name?
Nah, we couldn't, because they're from a different state. So some states, the names are different. So you can Google them up and stuff like that and find out. I Googled the name up, but I couldn't find out. So I asked my father, and by the way, we come from different states. You saw the map of India? Every state is linguistically divided. Everyone speaks a different language. Every state speaks a different language in India. So I don't speak the same language as my husband's state. So we come from different states. Now this niece of mine is getting married to another state, person from another state. So we couldn't make out. So I Googled it up just to see the caste, couldn't find out. Asked my father-in-law, he said, my father-in-law is 82. Okay, you'd think the caste system matters to him. And he said, the boy works for Goldman Sachs, earns really well. I don't think it matters.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I should shut up because, it doesn't matter. So, why should I worry about the caste? So it's changing. It's changing. Modern versus traditional. So that's just values. Traditional values could be religious driven, working, whether women should work or not, when should they work, what kind of job should they work in, whether you should give up work when you have kids, those kind of values, the traditional values, versus the modern values where, it's equality, everyone's equal, and we're going to dress differently when we're not going to carry our religion and our country on us. We're going to, like, if you go to India now, the modern Indian girls are wearing, short skirts, and they say the crime's dependent on that now in Delhi because everyone's dressing up, and that's, but that's the traditionalist speaking. You shouldn't dress provocatively because that's going to be the reason for your crime. Fair versus dark skin is pretty interesting.
Really interesting. So when I went to India, everyone was saying to me that if you're in the north, everybody's light skinned, but if you go down south, everyone's very, very dark skinned.
That's true. because it comes from the ethnicity of the people living in the north. They're more Aryan, and they originally came from Persia and from the western Hindu Kush mountains. That's where the original race came from, whereas the Dravidians are the ones from the south, and they're more like in Malaysia. You have, what do you call that, in the Orang Asli? Yeah. Well, the original people of the country were based from the south. So the Dravidians are the original people from the country, darker skinned, basically, and it's also hotter. So to some extent, maybe you're born fair, and then you kind of get tanned, and then it's a permanent tan for the rest of your life if you live in the south, because it's hotter in the south. But this fair versus dark skinned is a big, it's still an issue. It's still an issue in India, there's references of that in the book, because when Balram ends up
Nepalese girls.
The Nepalese
he
girls.
goes after the Nepalese
That's
girls
right.
because
And then
they're
when
fair-skinned.
he wants the Russian girl, and when he realizes the Russian girl's not blonde, he's like put off by the thing. So this whole obsession with blonde, light-skinned, light-eyed. And if you see Miss India, and I think I had a picture of hers up here. I think maybe I should bring a picture up there from the beginning. One of the Miss Indias who became Miss World is the one on the right. Everyone knows her, Aishwarya Rai. She's the face of L'Oreal. Look at her. She comes from somewhere in the center of India. She's light blue skinned, very fair complexioned, and she's seen as she epitomizes beauty in India. You know, so this is the obsession with color, which yeah. So if you are dark skinned, darkness as in dark skinned, is it an issue? It is an issue. My complexion in a typical, if I went into an arranged marriage, traditional setup, and they were trying to matchmake me with someone from my caste in my state, I would be considered as someone who would not be desirable, because my color is bordering on the darker side. So I'm darkness, yeah? And it doesn't matter that I've educated and I've got a top job or whatever it is. If it's matchmaking stage, you know what I mean? So darkness and fair and dark complexion is a real issue.
And would you say that's more of a modern sort of thing, or?
No,
is
it's
it
traditional,
always-
and it hasn't been wiped out. This is the big issue. It's traditional.
Yeah.
It's a traditional thing, and that's one thing that hasn't gone. With all the modernity and all the education that women have had and all that stuff is going on, it's still a bit of an issue.
Is it even a caste thing that like the?
And it also
down?
translates into, but that's a funny thing. It sometimes doesn't translate into caste system, like it hasn't with me. I'm a South Indian Brahmin, so the highest caste, but I'm still dark.
Yeah.
A North Indian Brahmin would be lighter. So it's not necessarily caste, but it's an issue. I think it's a social issue. Fairness creams sell the most in India. The company that I worked for when I started working in India had a cream called Fair and Lovely. Can you believe a cream called Fair and Lovely? And I sold it. You know, it was just so against my values, but you know, that was what I did. Then hope versus hopelessness. Yeah, so that's the other contrast. Do you have hope? Where do you get hope? Did Balram get hope? He got hope when he moved. But in Lakshmangarh, he felt a bit hopeless. So rural, hopelessness. No education, hopelessness. You know, so there's that feeling of hopelessness if you're stuck the way you are. And educated versus non-educated, that's the other issue, the big contrast. Where does your education take you? Can education take you anywhere in India? In the real India, it will take you. It will take you, you know, to higher areas. However, having said this, with all these issues, there is order in this chaos. Life goes on. The country is still growing at 7.6% GDP. Jobs are still there. Opportunities are there. People are moving on. People are still migrating. You know, light, dark, whatever. You can criticize whatever you want, but people are living and thriving.
I've got one more question for you. So I guess I'm curious about like Balram's personality, and whether you could say that Balram's personality is a sort of a little bit uniquely Indian. So he's often pretty crass. Like for example, he's got this giant chandelier in this tiny little office, and that for him is what it means to be rich. And we also hear him talk at one stage about how if you're a rich person, why would you wear just a white T-shirt with one word on it? He said, I'll have the biggest and boldest shirt you could possibly buy. Is that true?
Okay, so he, I think, symbolizes the nouveau rich, the Indian who was poor turned rich. He doesn't symbolize the Indian higher
rich.
classes, the born
like
rich,
Ashok is.
like Ashok is, or he doesn't symbolize the ones who were born in the urban area, educated themselves, and moved up. He symbolizes someone who's got rich quickly. And of course, then therefore everything is crass and everything has to be shiny and full of bling, and for him that's.
And then he's also very egotistical. He's always like, I mean, the fact that he thinks that he can write to Wen Jiabao and give Wen Jiabao advice, and he's saying, "I'm a great entrepreneur," and India is full of entrepreneurs. Is that?
Oh, well, that's I think more his personality, nothing to do with Indians. I don't think. I think as a race. If you want to generalize, I think we're pretty humble.
Wow.
As a race, Indians are pretty humble. It's the few that have got rich quickly that.
Yeah, so he's criticizing this sort of nouveau riche. Would you say that they are like that?
Yes.
That it's like that there is a crass, obsession with wealth?
Yes.
At the same time, it is combined with a great egotism.
Yes.
Like very, very selfish. And then the last one is that he's also kind of evil. Like he's more than willing to kill people to get ahead.
And that I think is
that nouveau riche as well?
Nouveau rich to some extent, but also I think morality is, you can't generalize morality. That's more his personality and the way they're picturing him in this book. But in India, can you really get from Lakshmangarh to an entrepreneur without doing a bit of that? Not sure.
And then the big question of the book is it justified to do it?
Yeah, it's justified. So which comes to my next slide. So is the book fact or fiction? What do you think? What conclusion have you drawn as a result of this? Fiction? Fiction? What do you think? Fact?
I think it's a bit of both.
Bit of both? What do you feel?
Mitzi?
Yeah?
Like fiction kind of like built up on facts.
Fiction built up on... okay, all right. So could Balram have gotten away with murder? Could he have assumed this new identity in Bangalore and made it big? That's fiction, in my opinion, because today every Indian is tracked biometrically with the eye and the fingerprint. Every Indian, 1.2 billion people. This is the big success story of Indian digital technology.
It doesn't sound like much. It sounds like Big Brother.
Nah. But you need something called an Aadhaar card, which is where your biometric scan of your eye and your fingerprint is built in. And you need a PAN card, even if you want to withdraw money from bank, open a bank account. You need this card for just about everything. Everyone still gets a socialist ration, and it's not worth eating because it's horrible. But if you go to the centers and produce your Aadhaar card, you get that. You get gas subsidized. You get electricity subsidized. So there's a subsidy, but only with this Aadhaar card. So whether he could have just lost his identity there in post-2008 India, no. But the book was written pre-2008, so maybe then. But today, there's a hell of a lot of more tracking. You can't just suddenly commit a murder in Delhi and come down to Bangalore. It's all interlinked. Okay? So I believe it's a work of fiction that portrays India as a corrupt country with unregulated development. But he's making a point. That's what I was trying to say. He's making a point. So I think he'd want to be bit exaggerated in his stories to make that point. The country is diverse though. Ethical standards are low, let's face it. And life is not as privileged as we have here. And people either stand out because they're brilliant or resort to extreme measures to move up, which is what Balram did. And education is the solution. So education is free in India. Though they say that they move him out of school because of they couldn't pay for it. It's so nominal.
Well, it's
so nominal.
So that he could work for them.
That's right. The fee is so nominal that to move a kid out of school would be dire. You'd have to be in dire circumstances. Can't feed the family, and you got to get that one more body working. It is a solution, But if it happens on the street, like it happened for Balram, his education happened on the street, then it could lead to non-ethical consequences.
Okay, cool. Did you have anything else?
Yes, one more thing, which is morality, and the whole story of morality in this particular novel. Is morality fluid? Do we blame a criminal for their decisions? How do you feel about Balram? Or do you justify it based on the circumstances in which he grew up in that oppressed society? Is that okay, the way he behaved? What do you think? So morality, I think, is a critical question at this stage. I'm not going to give you an answer because I might feel something and you might feel something different. You can justify it either way. But in India, a lot of this gets justified. So morality is quite fluid in India. You'd kind of, the circumstances with which this person grew up in, you can pardon someone for that.
And so Adiga is a bit of an outsider looking in on it, is sort of putting this kind of, outsider lens over it.
That's right.
Cool. All right, did anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask before we finish up? All right, well, I'd like to give Gita a round of applause. Thank you. Excellent. Just before you go, if your teacher's here or not here, just make sure that you sort of check in with them, because what they'll do is they'll just make a little note on Chronicle that you attended it, and it might go a little way towards like what?
Being a good student.
Sorry?
Being a good student.
Being a good student. There you go.
I have one more point before you go. I always have one more point. And that's the title.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we didn't discuss the title. White tiger, it's quite interesting. Everyone knows what a white tiger is, right? It's an albino tiger. It's a tiger that doesn't have the pigment. It's rare. In Las Vegas, I think there is a whole casino that displays white tigers prancing around, and people go pay money. Yeah, people go pay money to see the white tigers, but they're so rare. But a white tiger is an aberration. It's not the normal tiger. The tigers are extinct as it is. The white tiger is even more extinct. So the point I'm trying to make is that, is Balram the white tiger? Is he an aberration to a normal Indian?
Oh, very clever. We missed that, I think, on the video.
We did. We missed it.
No? Oh, excellent.
You got it on the video? Oh, okay.
We can put it in the DVD extras.
Oh, all right, okay. So, so in spite of his disadvantage, which is, if he calls himself the white tiger, he's got a disadvantage. He's albino, right? In spite of that, did he, through his achievement, demand respect from society? Like the white tiger zoo, they're rare. People go to see them, pay money.
Fair enough. That's a nice little tip. All right, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.